Just like Earth's countries, Briskillanya's countries can be divided further into distinct smaller entities. These can have different cultures and languages from their parent countries. There are even some distinct places like this that span more than one country. The ones this episode will discuss are Heeinya, Kelestia, Varokaxian Tashie, Wemtashia, Vahria, Boxe, Ithica, Deserkest, Pensolista, Murkan, Laisolista, and Retla. Heeinya is a cold, sparsely populated region in Vahria. Long ago, it was an independent country before being annexed by the rising Varokaxian Empire. Although the Varokaxians were originally oppressive to the Heeinyans, the relationship began to improve as the empire grew more prosperous. However, as Varoka began to unravel and the military became a bigger component in the government, the Heeinyans began to lose representation. When the Varokaxian Revolution occurred, most Heeinyans sided directly or indirectly with the rebels. They enjoyed a brief 3-year period of representation and coexistence under the new Varokaxian government that was abruptly ended when Yenton invaded the weakened Varoka and annexed the vast majority of Heeinya, causing an influx of Heeinyans to move into the remaining parts of the country. And Yenton absolutely refuses to give the Heeinyans any type of representation, not even allowing Heeinyans to hold public office in Heeinya. The Yenyantonian government is very oppressive to them in general, gradually decreasing the amount of land where Heeinya culture is allowed to exist. The Heeinyans fare much better in Varoka, where they have their own provinces. Most of the factions of Western Echin are essentially the same with different flags and slightly different ideologies. Kelestia, however, the only Athenian faction that doesn't claim to be the legitimate Athenian government, is an interesting case. Although it is loyal to the Athenian Republic, it doesn't follow the same laws. It was formed during the Fourth Athenian Civil War out of theocratic territory Democratic Athene occupied. Kelestia is known for being a lot more liberal and generally freer than the rest of Athene, even the Republic itself. The place is a tiny one, only having a single medium-sized city in the surrounding areas. It has an intense rivalry with theocratic Athene, which sees Kelestia as a city of degeneracy, filth, and paganism, something that Kelestians find hilarious. Varokaxian Tashie, also known by its Varokaxian spelling Tashie with a W, is, not surprisingly, Varoka's possessions in Tashie. It was acquired by Varoka in its Middle Imperial days, back when Wemvar was still many small states, then vastly expanded after Varoka's victory in the Varokaxian-Wembari War. Some of the Wembari majority areas were given back to Wemvar after the Varokaxian Revolution. The area remains controversial, as many Wemvaris want some or all of the region back, and many Varokaxians are supportive of giving some or all of the region to Wemvar to improve relations or to distance themselves from their imperial days. It is usually recognized by Varokaxians as being the bad part of the country, where poverty, illiteracy, and political extremism tend to congregate. Wemvar is known for being a very complex place, both historically and modernly. As a result of it previously being a collection of hundreds of tiny nations, it is still strongly subdivided into 6 pieces. The largest and most significant of these pieces is Wemtashia. Being the origin of Wemvar's first syllable, it's also by far the most populous. Around 40% of the Wembari population lives there. It is the location of the Wembari capital of Maifwe, and the Wembari monarch resides there. Wemtashia became a major power in the Tashie region by a mix of conquering and peacefully annexing the tiny countries that existed around it. Most of Wemtashia's north is urbanized, and it gets more rural and less densely populated as it goes south. Within the country, it is classified as one of the 2 upper constituents. The other upper constituent is Vahria, the origin of Wemvar's second syllable. Due to a personal union it had far before the formation of Wemvar, it has a rather large exclave that borders the Kalangir Ocean. Vahria has always been an ally to Wemtashia. This close alliance is why the union exists, as it led to a marriage between the monarchs, which led to a personal union, which led to an actual union that the other Tashian states agreed to join. Boxe is not an upper constituent, rather it is considered a middle constituent. Unlike the other 3 main components of Wemvar, it was never a unified entity under its own rule. After the others united, Boxe, named after the ancient city in its eastern part, remained a pile of many city-states. Around 300 years ago, the region was split into 2 main alliances which were at war, but the war was suddenly ended by the invasion of the Kaishians, a Heldari political party kicked out by the Heldari Democrats during that country's civil war, who then tried to take over all of Tashie, but failed. To vastly oversimplify, the Boxean region was then made part of Wemvar. Boxe still retains some of its strong internal divisions from before, but thankfully these never turned violent. The other middle constituent is Ithica. Within the 4 main Wembari nations, it is the odd one out. Practices the polytheistic religion of Ithicanism, while the others practice the monotheistic Drokeism. Ithicanism has many different gods, though gods may be a bit of a misnomer, as many of them are described as just being slightly more powerful than human, that represent anything from natural forces to very specific things like individual punctuation marks. There was never really a single Ithic country, as Ithica has always been divided into the 4 tribes of Heti, Dobi, Greti, and Ven, which were their own countries prior to Wembara unification, though they were closely allied to one another and had a strong shared government, so whether or not they were one country or 4 countries is kind of ambiguous. Today, the Ithic tribes are the main force within the country trying to align Wembara with the democratic countries. Deserkest is the least populous part of Wembara, and thus is considered a minor constituent. It exists in a thin strip of barely habitable land sticking north from the central desert. Deserkestians speak a language similar to Heeinya because that is where they originated. Deserkest used to be directly north of Heeinya until they were chased out for repeatedly raiding Heeinya villages. Deserkest is also known for the fact that it joined Wembara in a separate treaty than everyone else. Pensolista is a region in northern Wembara and southwestern Trebina. The Wembari part, South Pensolista, is another minor constituent. The Trebinan part is called Pensolista, which is sometimes referred to as North Pensolista when it needs to be differentiated from the Wembari one. The reason that there are 2 Pensolistas is rooted in history. When Kite invaded Tashie, its first target after conquering Boxe was the then independent Pensolista. Immediately, Wemtashia, Vahria, and the Ithic tribes came to its defense, starting the Third Kite War. However, Trebina also stepped in, stating that it would declare war on Kite if Pensolista was not withdrawn from. Not wanting to deal with the very powerful Trebina, Kite reluctantly accepted, and Trebina annexed Pensolista for protection. When Kite was defeated by the Tashian powers, the Tashians wanted Pensolista back. Trebina stated that most of the Pensolistans actually wanted to stay, partially because of their closer cultural ties to Trebina. So, they held a referendum, and the regions that wanted to remain in Trebina remained in Trebina, and the regions that didn't regained independence, and then became part of the newly formed Wembara. Finally, those are all the subnational entities of Wembara. Murkan is a nation that makes up the vast majority of western Trebina. Despite its large size, only about 1/5 of Trebina's population lives in the region due to the cold and hostile nature of the terrain. The people that do live here speak Murkani, which is sometimes considered to be a dialect of Trebinan. Geographically, Murkan is a lower altitude extension of the Tashie Plateau. Murkan, along with Pensolista, has a fair amount of autonomy within Trebina. Laisolista is one of the 5 provinces of Isatanam. Despite being the smallest and least populous of them, the nepotistic Isatanavian government treats it as a deputy of sorts, giving Laisolista a very disproportionately large amount of seats in the legislature, and making it the only province with a significant amount of autonomy. The reason for this is because Laisolista, back when it had the name Laisosa, supported Isotia in its forced unification of Rasilian Bay, which the Isotians gave them all of these privileges for. Laisolista's name can be approximated in English as Laisosa, the Duke. The final subnational entity I want to mention is Retla, the entity that comprises the eastern parts of Laval. Retlan, as previously mentioned, is similar enough to Labalian that speakers of each could hold a conversation. The Retlans are a seafaring people, something that explains its early borders that hug the Indian coast. Laval wanted control over the coast, so it and Retla agreed to give Retla vast amounts of inland territory in exchange for Retla becoming an autonomous part of Laval. This occurred roughly 700 years ago. That will be all for this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed watching it. The next episode will be about the Briskillanya measurement systems. Goodbye!